I'm Shubh Somani, a grade 12 student at the International School, Bangalore. I'm here with Mr. R.K. Mishra, one of India's top tech icons, who co-founded Yulu Bikes, which is one of India's most popular startups. He's also an expert in fields of public policy and urban mobility. Mr. R.K. Mishra has spent his entire life to make India a better place. It is such an honor to talk to you, sir. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. My father being a first generation businessman, I am naturally driven towards business. I'm also incredibly passionate about economics, and my curiosity in this field drives me to conduct projects. I run an economics magazine called the Epsilon Magazine, and I've also worked on economics and machine learning projects. Moreover, I'm creating a sustainable financial planning network for rural India. Eternum is what I call the series of interviews with prominent economists and businessmen that can help change the face of India. Thank you, RK Uncle, for this call. I'm excited to learn about your journey. So, when I look at your illustrious career, it makes me think about your beginnings. Tell us more about your education and paths that led you to this field.
So my early education was in a very small village and town in the state of UP, and unfortunately, the quality of education wasn't so great. Somehow managed to enter IIT, and I think I'm the first and the last person from that school who went to IIT. And I think that was, I think, a great breakthrough for my career as well as my, journey to where I am today. So I think that was the first major milestone and also the hurdle. After that, I went to do my master's to Tokyo University. Unlike everybody else from IIT in those days, almost like my batch was 250 people, undergrad IIT Kanpur, almost 220 odd went abroad, and out of which almost like 99% went to US. I was one of the odd ones who decided not to go to US. And of course, everybody was quite surprised, and some people also told that I'm making a mistake. I decided to go to Japan. And the reason I decided to go to Japan, because when I graduated in 1989, US was on a decline. Cold War had just ended, Berlin Wall had fallen. Uh, Internet was yet to become mainstream. Startup internet culture was not there. America was struggling actually, whereas Japan was at its peak. Japan was buying American assets, Rockefeller Center, Columbia Pictures. Japanese are flooding American market with their products, whether it's cars or everything else. 9 out of top 10 banks were Japanese. For me, it was very intriguing because I felt that Japan was bombed. In fact, only country which suffered the Holocaust, the nuclear bomb. That was the time when just few years later, India got the independence. And I was always used to compare, why India is still where we were and why Japan has become so advanced. It was very intriguing for me. And I thought the best way to figure out is to go and see how they are doing things. And I said, I can't go to Japan just like that, so let me go and do my master's there. And that's how I ended up going to Japan. And Tokyo University is where I went, which is Japan's most prestigious university. But they don't have any special program or other regular program like give GRE and go to US. They had a very unique program where they used to take one student from one country. It used to be called International Nation of Japan. My professor knew about that program. He told me that I think this is something you should apply. And they asked me why you want to come to Japan. And of course, my grades and everything was good in IIT. So I think they understood that I have deep interest in Japan. And I got the admission with full scholarship. And I think that was the second breakthrough which I got.
In your career, you've shifted from being a tech expert and a public policy leader to being an urban mobility expert. What inspires you to do the work you do today?
I think this has been gradual journey. You know, I was civil engineer at IIT. I did my masters in urban planning and transport. But then my startups and my companies which I made as an entrepreneur had nothing to do with civil engineering, had nothing to do with urban planning. It was in telecom software. And that's what I think is unique about, I think education gives you ability to learn. And then whatever opportunities present themselves, you need to do that. So my companies which I founded were essentially related to the telecom software, and another company which was India's first travel portal, Travel Genie. So my education and my entrepreneurship, education gave me the confidence, education gave me the ability to learn, but I did not necessarily use my civil engineering and urban planning transport skills in you know when my I did a startup businesses with primarily telecom and technology and software and things like that. But obviously, I managed to do well, and I had this passion. When I came back from Japan, I got even more restless because I went to Japan to find out why they are doing so well, with India. But then when I came back, I said, now let's make India do as well as Japan. And the obvious thing was that why our roads are so bad, why our traffic is so bad, um, why we don't have footpaths. And as you know, the cities essentially function by mobility, because if you're not able to move in the city, economic activity will not happen. Correct? You have to go to office. If you take 3 hours to commute, the 3 hours is a waste in traffic. I mean, Bangalore alone, almost $4 billion per month, per year rather, is the productivity loss in Bangalore alone, in IT sector alone, due to traffic congestion. So these were the problems which were bothering, when I came back to India in 1995 to start the company. And I ran that company for 10 years before I sold it in 2005. But then these things are always at the back of my mind, and given that my education in urban planning and transport, I could see that I have a solution. But then since I was running a business with nothing to do with it, and this work is nothing to do with your business, this is about public policy, correct? This is about infrastructure, this is about dealing with the government. So obviously, I kind of had decided that I'm going to retire when I turn 40. And this I had been even kind of telling myself and telling all people who are around me, my friends, colleagues, family. So I knew that, okay, when I retire at 40, what am I going to do? And I had this passion of trying to help the country and the cities in terms of urban infrastructure, transport, and things like that. So around 2002, 3 years before I finally retired from the business, when I sold my companies, I started engaging with the government. And it's not very easy, because you may want to do something for the city, but somebody should be willing to take your advice, correct? Suddenly you say that I want to do this. Government is not saying, okay, no, come. It's not very difficult. What's your interest? Why should you? I have so many officers. What is so great about you? So it takes some time to establish your credibility. So you start giving suggestions. Hopefully you will succeed and keep at it, and you become government starts taking over. And of course, over a period of time, you have to show that you not only have the idea, you don't have vested interest. But mine was primarily a kind of a voluntary effort, correct? I was not an IS officer, I was not a politician, I was not appointed by anybody. I was a citizen who was trying to help the city and the government. So, yes, it was a journey, but this was my passion for my city and for my country. I believe that any country, economy is run by the cities. uh, you know, cities are economic growth engines of any country. You talk about any big country, you talk about mega cities. For example, US, you talk about San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. These are the economic centers. talk about UK, I mean, only city you can talk about London, correct? London is almost 30% of UK's GDP. And in India, I mean, 8 cities, mega cities of the country generate 90% of the employment, formal employment, correct? So cities are the economic backbone of a country. And for me, it was very worrying to see our cities were not getting attention from the policymakers because their vote bank is in the rural India. So cities were kind of orphaned. Nobody talked about it. And no politician talked about it because if you talk about city, they think they are against villages. So it was a very, very complicated situation. But then I think starting around 2002, 2003, and I started by focusing on the road in front of where I used to live. It was a disaster road. It was a fantastic area in Whitefield where all the major CEOs of the companies, IT industry were living, but the road was pathetic. And that started my engagement with the government, and over a period of time, of course, I got much more deeply involved into it.
So it is clear from your work that you've done for India, you have an irrational love for India, which I also share. What is your vision for future India, and what is your message to young Indians?
I think, first of all, I think India can be empowered when every individual is empowered. So my first message to young people is that educate yourself well. You become capable of competing with the world. Because it's a global world. You have to be competing with the best and brightest of the world. So focus on your education, get the skills which are needed to compete with the world. That's why all of you should be trying to go to the best of the universities, get quality education, understand how the world works, understand what it needs to make a difference to your country. I mean, I chose this area of urban infrastructure, and of course now I do many more things in technology policy and through my Carnegie think tank. But I think you should have one passion, of course, should be ability to learn, because in your lifetime, for example, in our lifetime, we at least, my generation, we would have at least one or two careers. You know, I was a civil engineer but did nothing about civil engineering. Initial 2 years only I worked, which is a civil engineer, for example. Then I became an entrepreneur and all that. But then industry changed. When I started, telecom was a big deal. Now today, nobody, telecom is not that great. Now the people are all focused on AI, ML, cloud, data, software, correct? Industry will change. So first of all, you have to be mentally prepared that you have to change at least 2 or 3 careers in your life. Which essentially means that every time something new comes, you should be scared. And you'll not be scared because you have to reskill yourself. The skills which you have for the previous job or previous business will not be relevant. So you always have to continuously, you should be able to learn. So love for learning is very important. So you have to have love for learning and you have ability to learn. And which is what I think great school like TISB and the curriculum like IB and a great university where you guys potentially will go will help you. More than what you learn there, more important is how to learn and to be able to learn whenever you need. So that's number one. Once you've got learning, you have to deploy that learning for first making yourself do well. Whether it's a job, whether it's a business, you have to do well yourself. Because if you're not doing well yourself, you're not going to be able to help. If I did not have the financial security, I will not be able to retire at 40. And if I was not able to retire at 40, I will not be able to contribute to society the way I did. So make yourself first self-reliant. But in the process, don't forget that life is not only about you. There are a lot of people potentially who can't help themselves. So it's your responsibility to help yourselves. In the process, you end up helping others. And that way you help the society and you help the country. So my first suggestion at your age, at 18 years, your single-minded focus should be how I can be the best in my field. How can I be a person who's always willing to learn, capable of learning, and then how do I compete with the world?
I'm sure why that is why you won the Lead India competition. Can you tell us more about your experience winning that award, and what are the leadership qualities, and uh, what are the things you expect from the youth of India in terms of leadership?
So I think leadership is a very, I think, poorly defined and very, I think wrongly understood word. People think leadership is all about how many people like you on Twitter or how many people follow you in political rallies. That's not leadership. Leadership is leading by example. Leadership is by doing things which you do because you believe in them, without worrying about how many people are going to follow you or what rewards you are going to get. To me, leadership is taking the initiative and doing something which you really feel passionate about. That's to me is a true leadership, taking initiative and actually doing it. Now, Lead India essentially was my victory of the Lead India was, I think, an outcome and recognition of the work which I was doing before I went into Lead India. I told you I was starting to engage with the public policy and infrastructure around 2002. Lead India happened in 2008. So whatever work I had done in Bangalore and other places which are related to public policy, infrastructure, urban mobility, rural livelihood, all that work which I had done, the showcasing of that work. And of course, Lead India, it was almost like 36,000 people who applied for that from across the country. It was 6 months program in public, domain. It was in the newspapers and it was on TV. It was like a national big boss kind of show where you have to show your leadership skills in front of 1 billion people. And very, very talented people from across the country came there, correct? I was almost like a celebrity, every airport or everywhere I went, people recognized me and asked for my autographs, and it's all like crazy. In the flight I'll be sitting and people will come and ask for autograph. Uh, that was an outcome of my work. That was not the leadership. I think the true leadership was me taking that initiative in year 2000 to trying to do something which was not for my good alone. Of course, if the road got built in my area, I benefited. But then thousands of other people also benefited. When I fixed Bangalore's infrastructure, of course, I live in Bangalore, so I benefited. But then 40 lakh, other 50 lakh, other Bangaloreans benefited, correct? So that was it. So my work, which I initiated, and without expecting a reward, this is very important. You have to be passionate about the work, not what will get me, because then you'll get frustrated because it's going to be very difficult. It's not easy. Dealing with the government, dealing with public, getting anything done in public domain is very difficult. So unless the passion comes from within, you will not be able to sustain it. You won't be able to sustain just because you want to become a leader. You become leader by doing it. You don't do it because you want to become a leader. So just do something, have a passion, and just go ahead and do it. I mean, I don't know which city you come from. You're from which city?
I'm from Ahmedabad.
You're from Ahmedabad, correct? Now, yeah, Sabarmati Riverfront is a fantastic project, correct? And I actually, when this project was being done, I was part of BJP and I was running the BJP's good governance cell. And I went to Ahmedabad to review this project because it's an urban project. And today, when I see this, it's a fantastic thing. Now, you should think what Ahmedabad is missing. Ahmedabad doesn't have a lot of IT industry, correct? Ahmedabad doesn't have many job opportunities. It's a beautiful city. It's a great city to live. But you go to live only when the job opportunities are. For example, you should say, okay, fine, I'm going to create job opportunities in Ahmedabad. I'm just giving an example, correct? It could be a industry, it could be a factory, it could be a social enterprise, correct? Because society has a lot of people who are not so well to do. So once you have passion to do something, And also, I'll tell you the happiness and satisfaction when you get by doing things for others. Of course, you benefit in the process. If you're doing a business, you'll make more money. But if the intent is to help everybody else also, the happiness and satisfaction will be tremendous. And I think that will be the motivation which will drive you to do more.
That is amazing to know. Actually, that's amazing. I would like to tell you that I love Bangalore a lot. I've got an excellent education here, and you have lived your entire life in Bangalore. In your perspective, what makes Bangalore such an incredible city?
I think incredible city essentially comes from the incredible people. Bangalore has incredible people. Let me tell you that. Just think about few things, and when you go, what is the most important innovation India has done in last 10, 15 years, for example, which has changed the life of hundreds of millions who were not capable of doing it on their own. Something called Aadhaar, you heard about it? Correct? So what is Aadhaar? Aadhaar is an identification for everybody. So you and I had other ways of identification. We had passport, maybe a driving license, birth certificate. But a person in the village, nobody knew when he was born, correct? He didn't know he was not born in the hospital. He had no way for identification. And if you don't have an identification, I cannot reach you, correct? You could be Ramlal or Shyamlal. I have no idea. I am the government. I want to reach you. I want to help you. But I don't know who you are. So I have to reach you through somebody, which will be a government official, for example. Now, government official comes and says, this guy is Ramlal. And by the way, Ramlal is illiterate. Ramlal doesn't have bank account. And you want to give him some benefit to him, pension or whatever, give it to me, I'll give him. Then what happens? Ramlal gets only 50% of what he's supposed to get, correct? And many times, Ramlal is no longer there, but fictitious name of Ramlal has been created. So Aadhaar is such a fundamental thing to help at least 600, 700 million Indians, 60, 70 crore Indians, who absolutely live in anonymity. They had, nobody knew who is who. This idea of Nandan Nilekani and putting it together, by the way, when Aadhaar came, it was all volunteer driven. 6 of my friends who used to live in Palm Meadows, they left their jobs. 2 year sabbatical they took to contribute to this national initiative. These were brilliant minds, technologists who had come from all over the world. They had come back to Bangalore. Of course, Bangalore was a magnet for technology, so all of them came to Bangalore. But then, these are also the people who had this desire to serve the society. When Nandan gave a call that please come and help, I mean, my neighbors, 6 of them, all of them left their jobs for 2 years to give back to the country. Now, that's the incredible part of India. And now that's only not Aadhaar. After that, today you can pay your money from Bheem or PhonePe and all that. What is that? That is UPI. Who created UPI? Where it was created? In Bangalore. And by the way, this Aadhaar kind of database at that scale is nowhere available in the world. By the way, my neighbor, Vivek, he continues to do volunteer work as a CTO of Aadhaar till today. Similarly, the UPI is also developed in Bangalore. Correct? So I think Bangalore is incredible because the desire of the people to give back to society. Every city, every place will have intelligent and amazingly capable people. Mumbai has the richest of the people. But where the richest man lives, richest man of not only the country, richest man of Asia, lives, next to him is the biggest slum. He looks down, his building is $1 billion. It's the cost of his building. But he lives in the middle of a slum. And so is the rest of the Mumbai. What has Mumbai people done to improve the life of those people? Nothing. Correct? They always blame the government for whatever reason. In Bangalore, people did not blame. They came and gave the solution. Of course, they knew technology, so they gave technology solution, which changed the face of India. Imagine today, during the Corona crisis, the government had to give the ration. Government had to give the money to the people, poorest of the poor. Correct? If they did not have Aadhaar, if they did not have identity, if they did not have the bank account, and if they did not have the UPI, how will the money reach them? You know, close to 20 lakh crore has been distributed to the poorest of the poor in this country without leakage. Earlier, leakage used to be anywhere between 25 to 50, 60% of the money used to go to the middlemen, to the government officials, to the corrupt people. Now, leakage is close to zero because of this. So I think that is the incredibility of Bangalore, which comes from the incredible people who are in Bangalore, who give their personal time and effort and money for the public service to the nation. That's why I believe the Bangalore is the most incredible place, not only in the country, in the world. I have not seen this voluntary spirit. I've been in many, many countries, many cities. This is very unique to Bangalore.
Yeah, it is very inspiring to know about all your neighbors who created one of the India's, actually the world's biggest database. It is amazing.
Yes.
But however, Bangalore is among the most traffic congested cities in the world. Is also a city with many opportunities. Of course, the government invests a lot in the infrastructure, but what can the citizens do to help make Bangalore a better place in terms of congestion?
Absolutely. So Bangalore grew almost the fastest city anywhere in the world. When I came to Bangalore in 95, the population was 40 lakhs. Today the population is 1.2 crores. It has become 3 times in 25 years. There is the fastest growth any mega city has anywhere in the world. And obviously with that growth, and also keep in mind, Bangalore is not a poor city. Bangalore average income is highest in the country. So everybody in Bangalore can afford their own vehicle. Almost everybody. Correct? Now, when the city is growing that fast, and of course Bangalore has a very poor infrastructure planning. So that is, our politicians and our city planners, urban planners have failed there. But then, since they have failed and city grew so fast, obviously public infrastructure like metro, we have this 40-kilometer metro. Delhi has 350-kilometer metro, correct? Now, government did not provide the public infrastructure. Metro carries around 4.5 lakh people. BMTC, the buses, 6,000 buses carry around 45 lakh people. And metro carries 40 kilometer of metro, 42 kilometer carries only 4.5 lakh people. But the problem is buses can carry people, but buses are running on the same roads where the car and scooter and everybody else is running. So buses are even slower than your bike and car. Now, if your bike and car is going faster and you can afford a bike or car, you will not take the bus, because bus is not most comfortable, because you have to go from your home to the bus station, then from the bus station to your workplace. It's called first and last mile connectivity, correct? So government not only did not provide the infrastructure, they did not provide enough public transport, they also did not incentivize public transport. So citizens went ahead and bought their own vehicle. They thought they'll go fast. But the problem was everybody came on the road with their own vehicle and road became choked. Okay. So what citizens, I don't know if you're aware, so now we are creating the concept of bus priority lane. For example, on Outer Ring Road, India's first bus priority lane is almost operational now. From Silk Board to Kyarpuram going to Baipanhalli, around 20 kilometer plus 40 kilometer. 40 kilometer bus. So in this, buses only will go. Now, when you see, it is a left lane, and then you have bollard where nobody else can enter into that lane. Only buses will enter. Now, if you see the bus going faster, and Bangalore has good buses, air-conditioned buses also there, and you are stuck in the car and your bike in the other lane, and bus is going faster, obviously you'll be motivated to leave your car and motorcycle and go in the bus. But then citizens have to motivate themselves to go and sit in the bus and not complain, oh, bus lane is empty, bus is going fast, how come I am going slow? Of course, we want you to go slow. I want to go bus to go fast so that you move to the bus, because one bus can carry equivalent of 40 cars. Correct? If you go in the car, you are carrying that much space, but if you move the bus, your car goes and 40 people means 40 cars gone. Correct? Even if it consider 50%, 20 cars gone. Correct? So citizens should support and promote public transport. Second, citizens should be disciplined. They should not enter the bus lane, for example, correct? Because if you enter the bus, then how much police can monitor you? So citizens have to have discipline. Citizen needs to support the government initiative like bus priority. And third, we are creating these cycle lanes, correct? Now, even if you provide the bus, even if you provide the metro, what happens on first mile and last mile? From your home to the station to the office, station to your wherever workplace or factory. So there, government cannot do. First and last mile is always provided by private sector. So like your autos, correct? Shared autos, Ola, Uber. These are the first and last mile. But then not everybody can afford Ola, Uber. And autos don't go where you want to go, correct? And they're always harassing and things like that. Then these companies like Yulu come into picture, correct? So they take care of the first and last mile connectivity. So Yulu provides you from your home to the nearest metro station. For example, you are living, for example, in somewhere in Mysore Road, and you work in Outer Ring Road. So from your home to the metro station, you can take Yulu, which is 1 or 2 kilometers. Then from your metro station to Baipanhalli, which is around 20 kilometers, you can come by metro. And then from Baipanhalli, you take again Yulu and go to your tech park, which could be Bagbane Tech Park or something like that. Correct? So this is private sector providing first and last mile connectivity. Public sector providing the public transport makes the city move faster. For example, I lived in Tokyo for around 8-10 years. In Tokyo, you are not given permission to build a house if your house is more than 2 kilometers away from a bus stop or metro stop. If you go by your car to your office, you are not insured. So if accident happens, no insurance. There is no parking allowed in any office. Any office has no parking at all. They only give one park for the visitor. So people are forced, incentivized to take the public transport. We need to, over a period of time, we need to do things like that. So I think citizens need to first not only complain, also understand what the problem is. Government cannot keep making new roads. Where is the space to make the road? Full city is fully built. You widen the road, buildings will fall. Then people will complain, my building is being broken. Correct? And the government has to pay money. Today, to build underpass, cost is 30 crores. To acquire the land, its cost is 70 crores. So the cost of underpass becomes 100 crores. Construction cost is only 30 crores, but the land value is so high, and if I'm taking your land, I'll have to pay you. And majority of people refuse to sell. Then it becomes a court case. Then that's why every project takes 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So building more roads, widening roads is not the solution. You have to make use of existing roads, make quality roads, remove potholes, and focus on public infrastructure, public transport.
Yeah, it was great learning from you. I have one last question for you. If you could go back to your younger self, what advice would you give?
I think I was very happy as a young person because I didn't know much about the problems, and I don't think I will change anything. I would like you guys to live your life the way you are living, but only be aware that you are the privileged people. I was underprivileged, by the way. I came from a underprivileged background, lower middle class family. For me, the ambition was first to make sure that I make my living. Correct? That was my first priority, and that drove me. That time I had no idea of changing the world. That time the idea was somehow I need to get a job, and if you don't become a doctor or engineer in those days, you're finished. And I don't come from a business family. So for me, the first objective was educate myself and start earning. But then I always felt when I went to Japan, when I saw all this, and even in India, I was very fascinated by why other countries are doing better, why my country is not doing. So while you are focusing on yourself, keep an eye on your country, because you can't be great if your country is not great. You can't do well if your city is not doing well. You can't be a rich in an ocean of poverty. Otherwise, you'll be living like a richest person of the country. His building is $1 billion, but everybody around him is living in the slums. So your wealth, your happiness will be better utilized if people around you are also happy. Correct? So that's my learning. So please be aware of the issues, social issues. And whatever little you can do, whenever you can do, not today, whenever you can do. But always be aware of those. Always remember there are people who are less fortunate than you. And by the way, that helps you also. Correct? If you are living in a neighborhood where everybody is poor, luckily you are not living in America where you go to the wrong neighborhood, you'll be shot. Correct? I mean, you take a wrong turn in LA, I mean, you may not come alive. Luckily in our country, I mean, you can go to the poorest of the poor area, you will not be killed. You will not be mugged. Correct? That is our greatness of our country. That is the greatness of our culture. Poor people do not resent rich people. They believe that they are poor because God made them poor. He is rich because he worked hard and made rich. But if you don't take care of them, I'm not saying give them money, give them opportunities. Help them educate their children. If somebody is working in your home as a house help, make sure her children are educated. Correct? So these are the little things. Be aware about the problems of others. Your privilege is not your mistake. You're lucky, you're fortunate. But then there are so many who are not. And it is in your interest that they do better. So it's a very selfish thing also. Correct? There's no point being very rich in a very poor country. You can go and buy Gucci and Prada in Paris, but when you come here on pothole roads, you may have a Rolls Royce. How good a Rolls Royce on pothole roads? Correct? So this is what I want to tell people, that please do very well for yourself. But remember, there are many people who don't have much. So just be aware of that and do whatever you can.
That is amazing to learn from you. So I would like to conclude that your story, someone who's from a humble background, has done so many things: tech, public policy, urban development, and has done everything from scratch. Your story is so inspiring that I could call this the Indian dream. I'm extremely thankful for today's call, Mr. R.K. Mishra. Thank you for spending time with me and giving me a chance to learn from you, which has been amazing. I really appreciate your work and what you've done and what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shub. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you.